Screen showing?
It is.
You guys see that? Okay.
Yep.
So, okay, this is our part of our ongoing effort to try and bring things to you guys that might be of value. We're open for suggestions, by the way. Last time we talked about employee benefits. Katie and I are actually visiting with a couple attorneys right now to talk about product liability from a high level, you know, how product liability works in general in any industry, and then push that down to what that means in the cannabis world, et cetera. And so hopefully that will be something that we'll bring forward in the future. Wynn Williams is a colleague of mine. He's out in Los Angeles, so we hate him because he has beautiful weather. And we all know what we're facing the next couple days. He is one of our risk management experts. And the thing that I have up on the screen right now is a risk management framework decision process. And it's a little, you know, kind of professorial, but what I would tell you is that every time you guys problem solve, you do this whether or not you're thinking about it consciously. But what Wynn does is he puts structure around this. And we find a lot of people want to jump right to, I'm going to buy insurance for this, you know, whatever they're worried about. And sometimes they don't go through this process. And it is a good thing to go through. And a lot of you guys have done some of this already with your policies and procedures, but Wynn can help you think through those things. He actually, and his colleagues, we've got one here in South Dakota, can actually do site visits and, you know, from a safety standpoint and things like that. And what we want to do is we want to identify a problem. Like it might be like, you know, something having to do in a growing facility of patients, of safety for the employees, or maybe in a dispensary, making sure things are safe for people coming and going and things like that. And they evaluate this like this, and they come up with things that you can do that will hopefully mitigate risks. So we still might be buying insurance for some of these things. But some of them we might not, because this might help you avoid it. But if we have this process in place and you have a professional like these guys helping you, anybody that's a risk management expert, then you become a better risk. And what a better risk means is that you're always going to get the better buy, the better attributes of policies and things like that. And quite frankly, this will sound strange, but anything that like we work with you, that we sell you insurance for, we would rather you go through this process and never use the insurance, because let alone the cost of the insurance going up, the amount of time that you spend in claims is really a huge drain financially on you guys too. So Wynn's going to give us a discussion on risk management from a you know, business plan perspective and make a case for it. So I'm going to unstop this so you can share, Wynn, and the floor is yours. Yep, you're muted.
There we go.
Okay.
Can everybody see my screen? And got a yes?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Well, hey, thanks, Todd. And thanks for having me. So yeah, as Todd mentioned, the topic for today's conversation is the business case for effective safety management. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. Whoops. So as Todd mentioned, I'm the Senior Vice President for Risk Services, and I oversee risk services activities for the Pacific region. I am based in Los Angeles, but I feel your pain. I lived in Chicago for a long, long time, so I'm no stranger to you know, snow and cold and wind chill, etc. So I feel your pain, and you know, LA is not all it's cracked up to be. We've got a long list of things that make it kind of at times miserable here as well. But the weather is nice here. But so I'm the Senior Vice President of Risk Services for Hub International, and I'm also the U.S. Cannabis Risk Services Practice Lead. So at Hub, we have a cannabis practice specifically to address, you know, concerns in the cannabis space. So I've been working in the cannabis space for about 5 years, which doesn't sound like much, but in cannabis years, that's about, in dog years, that's about 35 years. So obviously it's an emerging market and it's a growing market. So what we have on the agenda for today is we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what I've seen over the last 5 years. So safety in cannabis then and now. Then we'll talk about the true cost of workplace accidents. We'll dive into the effect on the company's profitability if there's workplace accidents, and we'll wrap it up with the important part, which is safety management systems and how to implement effective safety management systems, and we'll provide you with some resources. I also want to apologize if my kid is home sick today. So if you hear coughing in the background, that's unfortunately, it's my little 4-year-old coughing away back there. But so let's talk about safety in cannabis then and now. As I mentioned, I've been in the industry for about 5 years. When I first started off in cannabis, there was intense focus on getting the license, making sure they're securing the license, you're compliant with the license to get up and running. A lot of focus on attracting investors, M&A, growth, and focusing on growing the business. Safety processes, yeah, to be quite honest with you, little to no safety processes in place. The main focus was on growing the business, and they really, business owners really didn't play, not that they didn't care about safety, it's that just everybody was wearing multiple hats and safety was typically not one of them. So what we saw a lot was, companies building their safety process, building the ship at sea, to use an analogy. These days, however, companies are still focusing on growing their businesses and attracting investors and their licenses, but there is an increased focus on employee safety, on property, securing and safeguarding the property, fleet safety, etc. So I am seeing that as the industry is maturing, so is the there is an increased focus on safety, which is great. In fact, several of the clients that I work with now have actual dedicated safety professionals on staff, and that's all they do, which has been a big change since I'm sure you're aware that in the cannabis industry, there's a lot of folks that wear a lot of hats. So that's good news. So let's talk about the true cost of workplace accidents. So if there's an injury, if there's a workplace accident, there's direct costs and indirect costs, and I'll dive into those here in a little bit greater detail. But obviously, you have the cost of the claim, you've got medical expenses, and you've got some hidden costs. But you also have other costs. You've got regulatory fines. If there's a serious injury, OSHA may come out to your location. If they come out, they typically issue citations which carry fines. And if OSHA keeps coming out to your facility and issuing citations and issuing fines and seeing the same things over and over and over again, then it could start getting into willful and repeat, and it could turn into criminal negligence. Also, you have that possibly could have effects to your brand. There could be brand damage. There could be inefficiencies that lead to poor customer experiences. So these are all different costs of workplace accidents. So we're going to dig into these in a little more detail. Whoa. Sorry about that. So let's talk about direct losses. So if I'm an employee, I get injured, I pull a shoulder, there are some direct costs that are associated with that injury. They're pretty evident, right? So I have to go to the clinic, I have to go to the hospital, there's medical costs that are associated with that injury. If I'm going to be out of work for a couple of weeks, then there's wages, the company has to make me whole. So there's some costs. They've got to pay my wages. If I lawyer up, there could be expenses, legal expenses, and other expenses, and insurance premiums would likely go up. So these are direct causes, and I'm sure we're all well aware of these, right? Typically, these are all covered by insurance. Now, and I'll let my, oh, come on now. The ship was supposed to go along and hit the iceberg, but I guess I'm having a delay on my computer here. But so direct losses are just the tip of the iceberg. So there are hidden costs that are associated with injuries. So if these could be administrative costs, lost time, inefficiency. So I'll give you an example. If I'm a supervisor and I have an employee that injures themselves, I have to drop what I'm doing, stop doing my regular job, take the employee to the clinic, wait around till they get treatment, start doing an accident investigation. This is all time taken away from what my normal job is. What's my cost? What's my hourly rate? How much time am I spending doing these other administrative things that are, related to the injury? The employee's out. It's going to be if there's going to be lost time associated with the injury, then I'm missing a person, right? So I've got to find somebody to backfill that slot. I've got to retrain somebody. I've got to hire a new employee to backfill that slot. So that creates tremendous amount of inefficiency with my people. Could be inefficiency with equipment, material. On the dispensary side, could be a loss of customer service. It could be a ding on customer satisfaction. So all of these are indirect costs. They're hidden, and it's very difficult to put a number associated with these. And these are not covered by insurance. So some folks say that ratio between direct losses and indirect losses is 1 to 4. So for every dollar you spend in direct loss, you can multiply it by 4 to estimate the indirect losses.
Hey, Win, can I jump
Yes,
in for a second here?
You bet.
So from a workers' compensation standpoint too, I'll assume nobody on this call has a deep knowledge of that. So workers' compensation insurance is really, it shouldn't even be called insurance. It's a social agreement in society where employers, you buy, you're in the workers' compensation program, and the employee agrees to work within the workers' compensation program if they're hurt, and thereby not sue you. If they can opt out of that, but they rarely do. And then the program, as you might imagine, is very pro-employee for the most part. And so there are things that, you can Google like top 10 ways of, work comp fraud. And it's things like, if there's an injury right away Monday morning, may not have been an injury in your workplace, might have happened at the softball game on Sunday, but they want it on your medical bill and not their medical bill, and things like this. And then we have employers many times that, if they're not familiar with this, they don't understand that, like, when your employee is hurt, you want them to at work somehow. If they can't do their job, you want them to return to work doing something that they're allowed to do by the physician, sit at a desk, whatever it is. The reason being is, if you send them home, they're going to be, they have to be paid by the insurance company 2/3 of their average weekly wages going back 6 weeks. And that is every job they have. So if they've got multiple jobs, your insurance company is going to be paying for all of that. And you will eventually pay 3 times that amount back in your insurance premium, because it's going to explode your insurance cost. And you cannot jump from carrier to carrier to avoid that, because you have a grade called an experience modification rating that will follow you everywhere. So workers' compensation is not really insurance. It's a social agreement. You have a grade that follows you everywhere. And the key, prevent injuries. And when injuries occur, get them treated quickly, and then keep your employee working. That's all I would leave you with here.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll touch on each one of these items as we go along. So I'll just give you a case study here. So Todd mentioned that these claims follow you for a little bit. So we'll talk in a little more detail. We won't get into we won't get into super boring detail. That's Todd's job, right? All the insurance stuff. But we'll get into enough detail which will cast some light on kind of how they calculate all this stuff. But let's do a quick case study here. So this is a company. It's an actual company. I won't say who it is, obviously, but I pulled claims for the last 4 years, and it's nobody on this call, by the way. Had a total of 43 claims totaling $228,000. $584, right? So I ran these numbers through a calculator called the OSHA Safety Pays Estimator, which you can Google. I'll have this. It's a link that I have on the resources here, but anybody can access it. So basically, I ran it through the calculator. So the direct costs we know is about $228,000. The OSHA safety calculator calculated all the indirect cost, all the hidden cost to be about $251,000. So we mentioned on the previous slide that, some folks, use a 1-to-4 ratio, 4 times the direct. So this is a very conservative estimate. So the total direct and indirect cost is about $480,000 and about $480,000. So assuming a 3% margin, how much do y'all think would be needed in additional sales to cover these losses? Just take a guess or throw something out in the chat there. Give it a couple of seconds. How much you think you would have to sell to cover that $480,000? Got a shy group today. Well, according to the OSHA Safety Pays calculator, we got about $16 million that we would have to sell to recoup that the direct and indirect losses. That's $4 million of extra sales, extra product that we have to sell per year. So those are real dollars. So as Todd mentioned, isn't that why we have insurance? I mean, come on, that's we can just send it off to the insurance company, they'll take care of it, no big deal, right? Well, yes, but so yes, the insurance company will pay for those will pay for those claims, but your past losses will drive future workers' comp premiums. And again, I'm not going to bore you with the details, but basically the insurance company has a formula. They'll decide what kind of workers you have, what class of workers, the size of your payroll, and they'll take your experience modifier, which Todd mentioned earlier, and they'll run it through a calculation to determine what your premium is. So that experience modification rate is basically your loss history, rolling 3-year loss history, and compare it, and they'll compare it to similar businesses, right? So they'll compare your 3-year loss history to other cannabis businesses, and then they'll assign it a number, and we'll talk about that on the next slide here. But the most control you have, so you guys have the most control over that experience mod, and the key takeaway is the fewer and less expensive your claim experience is, then the lower the experience modification rate is, and the lower your premium. So 1 is kind of the magic number on this experience mod, right? So if you have an experience mod of 1, then you're experiencing about the same losses as your competitors, as your peer group, as other cannabis companies. If your experience mod is 0.5, well, then guess what? You're doing better than your peer group, and you're going to get a discount on your workers' comp insurance. If your X mod is over 1, if it's a 1.5, then you're paying more. So you're leaving money on the table at this stage if your experience mod is over 1. So that's kind of the magic number. It's worth checking in every year, getting that number from Todd, just to see kind of where you're at and see kind of where you need to be. Again, I mentioned it's a rolling 3 years. So in 2022, you're being assessed for the years 2020, 19, and 18. So the good news is, if you had a really bad year in 2018, next year that'll roll off your experience, and it should help your experience mod. The bad news, though, is if you had a bad 2020, that's going to stick with you for a couple more years. So let's face it, insurance companies, they're businesses. They insure risk. So if they see you as a high risk, then they're going to charge you more. So on the flip side, if a claim occurred, a work comp claim occurred this year, then that's going to be on your permanent record, if you will, for 2024, 25, and 26. So, okay, now what? Now we've made the case that these numbers are real. They stick with us for a few years. So what can we do to lower that XMOD, to prevent employees from getting injured and from and lowering and improving our safety? So this is a pretty famous, excuse me for a second. This is a pretty famous triangle in the safety world, and this was put together by a fellow by the name of Heinrich back in the 30s, and he was an insurance guy, and he did a bunch of studies on insurance claims. So basically what he found was that for every 300 minor injuries, that there was 30 serious injuries and 1 fatality. So basically the takeaway was that there's a correlation on, if you have more injuries, then the chances of having a severe injury or a fatality are greater. This has been used and challenged by a bunch of different companies. That, ConocoPhillips, they kind of plug these numbers into their own experience, and their estimation was for every 300,000 at-risk behaviors, that resulted in about 3,000 near misses, 300 recordable injuries, 300 lost workday cases, and 1 fatality. So the key takeaway is if you reduce the at-risk behaviors, then you reduce the risk of injury and severe injuries. But we have to be careful though, because just because you've completely eliminated the at-risk, you've eliminated injuries, you've eliminated lost workday cases, doesn't mean there's not the potential for a fatality. So this is a fairly new concept in the safety world the last few years or so, and a significant injury and fatality decision tree. So if you have an incident that may or may not have resulted in an injury, resulting from lockout, tagout, confined space entry, vehicle collision, guarding, and then the other ones working at height, the ones that are listed in here, then you have a significant injury or fatality exposure. So if you do have an incident, near miss, or an injury that resulted in any of these, you need to take special consideration and start digging into those, because you got lucky. That very likely could have resulted in a severe injury or a fatality. Just to give you an example, unfortunately, I see when I go out to clients, not necessarily cannabis clients, but manufacturing and processing, food manufacturing processing clients, employees will bypass machine guards, or they won't lock out and tag out the equipment that they're working on. Many times those unfortunately lead to amputations, severe injuries. So if you do experience any incidences, whether it's a near miss or a minor injury resulting from any of these, I would take a very long, hard look at that, because you got lucky. It could have very well resulted in a severe injury or fatality. So yes, sir.
Real quick, I hope I don't steal your thunder here again, but when we talked about preventing and treating, that's called lag. And why you want to treat injuries right away, guys, is that it's absolutely statistically proven. If you don't treat an injury right away, it gets expensive, just really, really expensive. And what you're going to have, I think, mostly, hopefully, in your facilities is going to be slip, trip, falls, and strains. But those can be really expensive. If somebody hurts their back, I've seen those go to 6 figures so quick, it just make your head spin.
100%. And I should have thrown a slide in here on the most common injuries that I've seen in the cannabis space, but you're exactly right. Slips, trips, and falls is a loss leader, and sprains, strains, repetitive motion, ergonomic type injuries are also a loss leader as well. And as Todd mentioned, yes, these soft tissue injuries, they're very difficult to treat. A lot of times employees don't report them. They try and work through the pain or whatnot. And they can they can get aggravated over time for sure. So what's the solution? We've made the business case that safety makes sense, right? Safety causes us to leave money on the table. So what are the solutions? And the solution is to implement a solid safety management system. So I know this is a very busy slide, but I'll kind of walk you through it. So, but we'll start up here on the top point of the star. So part of the safety management system is managing the work site. Well, sorry, let me start at the very center of it. So implementing a safety management system, it all starts with upper management, right? Upper management has to be on board and has to support the overall safety management process, or just like any other initiative that a company undertakes, if upper management doesn't support it, it's likely not going to be successful. So upper management has to be active, has to support it, and has to be involved. Now let's talk about the work site, this top point of the star right now. So it's important to manage safety in the work site. And what that entails is identifying the roles and everybody's roles and responsibilities. Somebody has to be responsible, right? Somebody has to take overall responsibility for safety. They have to assign, safety responsibilities throughout the organizations. The companies that I've seen with the best safety experience are, one, they have upper management, full upper management support, and then secondly, supervisors are highly engaged in the safety process. So supervisors, they see the work that's getting done day in, day out. They know how to do the job right. They know the shortcuts and how to do the job not so right. So supervisors need to be involved. They need to be assigned. Responsibilities within administering the safety process. Also, with managing the work site, hazard assessment and hazardous control. We have to know what are the hazards of our facility. And that comes and we identify those hazards by doing an inspection or doing an assessment. Once we've identified what the hazards are, is it our extraction process? Is it slips, trips, and falls? Is it ergonomics? Are folks carrying pots full of resin, across the floor? How are we going to control those hazards? And then we can control those hazards by a number of different ways, but setting firm safety policies, safety procedures, standard operating procedures, creating an injury and illness prevention program. All of these are part of managing safety at the work site. So moving over to the star on the right there, managing the employee. So obviously employee behavior is a big part of managing the overall safety process. So how are we hiring? How are we retaining our employees is critical. It's super difficult to find employees right now. And, we just may need bodies and we're tempted to just hire whoever, but we have to be careful of that because we could be hiring our problem. So employee selection is very important. Once they're on board, how do we onboard them? What kind of orientation do we give them? What kind of education? What kind of safety training are we giving them? What kind of regular periodic safety training are we giving them? What kind of communications are we sending out? We have to make sure that our employees know what's expected of them, what their responsibilities are, and how to work safely. We have to train them how to work safely. But we also have to hold them accountable. If we've given them all the tools to do the job safely and they are still making safety violations or, not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then we have to have a way to hold them accountable. It's a disciplinary action process that's equitable and fair. So managing the work site, managing the employee, And then managing the program. This is kind of going back to Todd's initial slide there. This is a process. Safety is not just a program, it's a process, right? So we identify the hazards, we control the hazards, we're controlling the employees, we're managing the employees. It's a continuous process of improvement. So we want to keep a tab on, we want to do periodic loss runs. We want to reach out to Todd or the carriers and get loss runs. We want to do loss analysis to see where the trends are. Is the trend arrow going up? Is the trend arrow going down? If we do have accidents, we want to make sure that we do thorough accident investigations. The purpose of these is to find ways to prevent them from happening in the past, not to assign blame or find out who's responsible. It's to prevent the accidents from happening in the first place. So we want to do thorough accident investigations. We'll want to do periodic audits of our safety policies, our safety procedures, our SOPs, make sure that they still work, make sure that they're still relevant and that they're being followed. So managing the program overall is an important part of the safety management system. So typically, when you look at, safety management systems, they focus on the work site, they focus on the employee, and they focus on the program. And that's overall the safety management system. But as Todd mentioned earlier, there are other elements that we need to take into consideration. So the safety management system is focused on preventing the accident from happening in the first place. That's what we want to do. That's the most efficient, and that's the right thing to do. But stuff happens. That's why insurance companies are around. Accidents do happen. Injuries do occur. So as Todd mentioned earlier, we need to help control the cost of those claims. So one of the things we want to do, and then on the bottom left-hand corner, we want to manage the medical providers. So you want to make sure that you have a good occupational clinic that's close by, that's in network, preferably your carrier's network. And that's going to work to, one, provide good treatment to the employees to get them back to work quickly, but also that understands that you're a business and you have a business to run and you want to get those employees back to work. So you'll want to identify a good occupational clinic. You'll want to set treatment expectations. And the reason that's, and bring them over into your job site, give them a tour of your facility so they understand your business. Super important. Go visit their location and see if they've got the lawyer commercials on the TV in the background. Excuse me for 2 seconds.
Guys, I will tell you too that asking if you've got an occupational medicine clinic near you, that might sound strange to you if you've never worked with them before. That's what they do. They will come visit your work site, and in fact, beyond getting to know you, they'll walk around your work site and they'll ask you questions about what your employees are doing, and they might even share some ergonomic tidbits that are valuable as well.
100%. And it's important to set those treatment expectations with the occupational clinic. They get that, you're their client. So their first job is to treat the patient, but they also need to understand that you're the business and you need to work with them. So I'll give you an example, a very simple example. So if I'm an employee, I pull a shoulder or something, it's minor. The clinic, if we send them to an urgent care clinic, they may issue a prescription for a pain medication. Well, once they do that, that becomes a recordable injury, and you have to record that on your OSHA 300 logs. I don't want to get too far down in the details, but if you go to an occupational clinic and you say, hey, well, I want to use conservative treatment, I want to make sure my employees are cared for correctly, but at the same time, I want conservative treatment. I want y'all to explore conservative treatment methods. Then, maybe they just maybe the occupational clinic will recommend Advil or something, some non-prescription medicine that won't affect your OSHA 300 log. You might want to consider nurse triage vendors like a MedCore or my company Nurse. These are really cool because if I'm a supervisor and Todd's my employee and Todd injures himself, Todd comes to me, reports the injury. I can hop on a 1-800 number and I can call this nurse triage. And they will talk to both me and to the employee, to Todd, and kind of triage the injury. If it's relatively minor, they may say, Todd, take a couple of Advil, put some ice on it, and check back with us tomorrow. That might be all that he needs, instead of just sending him immediately to the clinic. It takes the burden off the supervisor on whether or not he should or shouldn't, or she or shouldn't send them to a clinic or not. So
But
the client,
let me jump in again here. So any of you guys that are my clients, I use a carrier who provides nurse triage services. So you have access to that. And I'll give you a real live example of how well that can work. Is that we had an employee that got hurt, reported it, and at that time just said, I think I'm okay. And then they went home. It was a Friday, went home that weekend. Spouse became very worried about the injury they had. And so where do you go on a weekend? They ended up at an ER. And so had they been to an urgent care or an occupational medicine clinic, that would have been probably $150 charge to be seen. But they went through an ER to get the same diagnosis that an urgent care or occupational medicine clinic would have done. And I think it was like over $3,000 or something like that. Consequently, if they had been on nurse triage at that time, injuries, hopefully don't happen very often. So when they come to your HR person or they come to you, you have that panic moment of, what do I do? Well, if part of your process is I call nurse triage with the employee, that nurse triage is going to go, they're going to do your documentation of your injury report that you need to do. They will have it then filed with your carrier in case it does become a claim that they say, yep, you need to go to a clinic or whatnot. And then the other thing is that many times those nurse triage will follow up with your employees, or your employee has that number now. So if they do roll into the weekend, they're like, man, I don't think I'm getting better. They can call that number again and say, what do you think? And that nurse might be able to get them through the weekend or assure them they're going to be okay, or say, yeah, you do need to go in and be seen. But at least you have a professional and managing it, somebody, that's what they do.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, so managing the medical providers, that's post-injury, and then managing the claim process overall. And Todd alluded this to a little earlier. Early reporting is key. There is a direct correlation between late reporting and the cost of the claim. If you report them late, the claim is going to cost you a lot more. One thing you want to make sure that you share with your employees is if they have an injury or a near miss, just to report it immediately, no matter how minor it is. I know a lot of employees just want to work through it. It's like, yeah, I just tweaked my shoulder, I just tweaked my knee, I'll just work through it. But you need to reinforce with the employers to report that injury to at least get the process rolling. If the employee does have to go to the clinic, is going to be out for a little bit, say the occupational clinic issues restrictions to the employees. Maybe they say they want them to sit home for a couple of weeks. You want to reinforce with the occupational clinic that you have a return to work policy, or sometimes they call modified duty or light duty. You want to get those employees back to work doing some sort of job, whether it's sweeping floors or doing some kind of job that will suit their restrictions. The reason for that is there's a couple of reasons for that. One, if they're sitting at home for 2 weeks, the meter is running on their wages. So the insurance company is paying those wages, so that'll automatically contribute to the claim cost, and that'll stick with you for the next 3 years. Also, if they're sitting on the couch, they may be watching daytime TV, and there's the lawyer commercials, the "were you injured at work" commercials on, and they may lawyer up too. So, but the key benefit really is just to get them back into the into the workspace, reconnect them with work, get them doing work, and that helps lower the cost of the claim, but it also reconnects them with the work, and they're likely to come back to work a lot quicker if they would, if they were just sitting at home. And then
Guys,
the last-
also, this
Sorry,
is
go
an insurance payment. So again, 2/3 of their average weekly wages, and that's any job they have. So if that doctor restricts them from working and they got hurt on your site, that's yours. You own all their jobs. So you own all of their wages. They're due all of that. That 2/3 of their average weekly wages, since it's an insurance payment, they pay no income taxes on it. So that is straight to them. So that's how they get comfortable, is that they look at that and go, oh, I'm not too far from my average net wages, and I like being at home or whatever it is. And so we're not saying that happens a lot, but it will happen invariably to you. You'll find, unfortunately, that you'll hire somebody at some point who knows the system and will abuse it.
Yeah, and I, you know, we mentioned at the top of the call that I live in California, and that was, and I'm fairly new to California. I've been in California for about 5 years. And I moved here from Texas too. So there's two different extremes now. One of the things that I noticed here in California was that people game the system, the work comp system. They know the system and they game it. But if you have a solid return to work process, then that helps that kind of closes down one loophole that they can use too. Not that it happens a ton in South Dakota, I don't imagine, but here in California, certainly it's prevalent, and we highly encourage, if you have operations in California, to implement or anywhere to implement a return to work program. And then the last little bit there on the claims process. Sorry. The last little bit on the claims process is just to make sure that the claim is moving forward. So that you can do that by having regular claims reviews with Todd and your carrier, just to make sure that the claims are moving forward to closure, so they don't stall out somewhere, and that helps reduce the cost of the claim. So again, we went through a lot in a very short amount of time, but we want to prevent the injury from happening in the first place, right? It's the right thing to do. We do that by managing the work site, by managing the employee, and overall managing the program. If an injury does occur, then we have our healthcare team in place, an occupational team, occupational clinic team in place, and we're bringing them back to work on restricted or light duty. So the last thing that I'll touch on is an injury and illness prevention program. So we talked a lot. We can keep this safety management system simple, or we can make it super complicated. And I know there's a lot of words on this screen and it looks very complicated. Hub International our risk services team has developed an injury and illness prevention program that details these 8 key functions here. Todd and I can provide this to you, and that can give you like a good starting spot. But a good injury and illness prevention program, they're required in California. South Dakota is a federal OSHA state, so there's no OSHA requirements that you have an injury and illness prevention program, but it is a good high level management system, and it's based on a lot of the things that we just talked about. So it'll identify, it'll outline who's responsible for what, how an employee is expected to comply, a process for identifying hazards, inspecting for hazards, doing investigations if there's an injury or an illness, how to correct hazard control, how to correct hazards, different forms of safety communication, whether it be safety meetings, regular safety meetings, safety postings, check mailers, that kind of thing, and training. And then the last piece there, just on an overall safety management system, is record keeping. So all the good efforts that you're doing, whether it's training, whether it's inspections, whether it's, whatever it is, roles and responsibilities, document. If you didn't document it, it didn't get done. And if something were to happen and OSHA comes out, they're going to ask you for your safety manuals. They're going to ask you for your training records. They're going to ask you for a ton of stuff. If you don't have the documentation, they're going to issue a citation. So all of this stuff is great if you do it. And all of this stuff is great, but it's also got to be documented. So again, we have a template for an IIPP that we can send along with this copy of this PowerPoint, and we can send it along to you. So the last little bit there, resources. Again, you can either contact Todd. I'll send the template for the IIPP to Todd. Y'all feel free to use it. California, I know Cal OSHA, you're not Cal OSHA, but Cal OSHA does have a bunch of good resources up there that you can dig into. And then the next two are different safety management system guidance documents. I think there's a fee for both of these, but they lay some pretty good groundwork on how to establish a safety management system. And then the OSHA safety pays estimator, which we talked about earlier in the presentation. There's a link for that as well. So you can run your own numbers and see kind of if you need to take numbers to the CFO or to the CEO or whoever that is to make a business case for implementing a safety management process, then those numbers can help you out. But that's all I had. I'm open to questions. Todd and I are open to questions. If you have any, feel free to throw them in the chat box or unmute and ask away.
I would tell you too, guys, there's another aspect of this. Your carriers many times will send a loss control inspection of your facility. So I've had calls from people asking, like, is this legit? This person said they're from our carrier and they want to come look at our store, for example. And that is. And like most recent one I had for a client here in Sioux Falls, the client had fire extinguishers that they had put out in the dispensary, but they put them out themselves, and the carrier wanted that to be a third party. And the reason being is that they wanted that third party to inspect them annually and to change them out. So those fire extinguishers are good. There were no smoke alarms in there. So the client installed smoke alarms post this inspection. So there are those kinds of things too. There are a lot of resources either through your broker or through your carriers that you can find. So any of these things, don't feel like you have to go it alone. Like Wynn said, everybody's aligned with you in order to, whatever they're insuring, they don't want to happen. So they will offer you resources to try and make sure they can help you.
Any questions or any comments? All right, well, you all know Todd, so you know how to get a hold of him. Again, my name is Wynn Williams. Thank you for spending some time with me during lunch, and appreciate the time.
Thanks, Wynn.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Wynn.
All right, see you guys.
Bye, Todd. Bye,
Take
Wynn.
care. Bye-bye.
If anyone else has anything they want to discuss, we can do that now, or otherwise we'll give you 5 minutes back.
Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate it. Good reminders.
Yeah, great job, everyone. Thank you.
All right.